Good morning, gearheads, and welcome back from the Formula One summer break. We're going to get you all ready for the Dutch Grand Prix. This is Jon Massengale. I'm sitting in the studio in Austin, Texas. Jonathan Green is not with us this morning, but Bob Varsha and Chris Medland. And Chris is live in Zandfoort. I'll start with you, Mr. Varsha. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, thanks. Here at the crack of 8 a.m. The sun's only been up for about an hour, so, just shaking the sleep from my eyes, but I'm ready to go.
Well,
it's time to go racing.
I'm still waiting on the sun. Chris, the sun's been up over there for several hours.
Yeah, it has, and it's nice to actually see it today. Each morning I've traveled in, getting the train in and then walking to the circuit, and it's been blowing a gale and hammering it down most of the time. You get soaked. But today it's still blowing a gale, but it is gorgeous sunshine. So not exactly warm, but I will take this after the last few days.
Yeah. If this were a sailboat race weekend, we'd be in great shape.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's true. Well, look, we've got plenty to talk about. We've been away for the summer, and we've got Lando Norris with a monster lap on the pole today, and Max Verstappen trying to chase him down. And we've got plenty of stories. And Chris, anything happened overnight? After we went off air post qualifying yesterday, there were a couple of penalties, but anything else?
Well, kind of, because those penalties are pretty big ones, some of them. One of them was Lewis Hamilton getting a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Sergio Perez. But the one that really stung, I think, was at Williams, where Alex Albon was disqualified from qualifying. He had qualified 8th. The car was quick, but the new floor that the team has brought here was slightly too big. Didn't meet the regulations. And the team says by their own measurements, it did and had multiple times, and they could prove that. But they didn't dispute that when the FIA measured it. And what you do is you actually scan these parts because like a volume rather than just, a point to point. They said at that point, based on the FIA measurements, which are the ones they have to adhere to, it didn't quite fit. We're talking a matter of millimeters, but it meant that Albon was disqualified. They've managed to just basically shave off the bits that they needed to shave off, and the car is good to go today from the back of the grid. So they didn't really need to change anything actually in that sense. But that means Albon, sadly, not starting from 8th place. Also, can add to that, at Haas, Kevin Magnussen, who would have been starting, I believe, 13th if that had all played out without him taking a penalty. He's taking 2 new power unit components, and that means he will start from the pit lane because he's done that without approval of the stewards. So, quite a few changes, actually, after qualifying.
Yeah, I was noticing that in the official FIA documents this morning, including Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, a number of cars changed another a set of components legally. So, it's interesting. I'd kind of like to know the backstory there about why they felt the need to make these changes. Are they actually improving the cars, or are they just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks?
That tends to
surprised.
be when items have kind of worn. So, for Max, for example, he said to check the floor. I think after his first run of Q2, because he thought he maybe ran a bit wide at the penultimate corner and maybe damaged something. If you've got any signs of wear, you can replace it like for something that's not damaged. That's allowed by the FIA under Parc Fermé rules. Actually, weirdly, the list that you'd have looked at, that's normally longer. There's normally more cars with something. Because if you think the speeds they're doing, they'll just see something that they're not too happy about, or maybe a stone flicked up and chipped something, or whatever it may be, and they'll just repair it or replace it. And they get approval from the FIA to do that. So, on this occasion, it was actually quite a short list, but you're right. It was Max's car had the most. The rear skid blocks, I think, were replaced as well. So there was, I think, that floor kind of strike that he was talking about. They just wanted to clean it up.
Well, I want to start this morning, guys, with the discussion about Lando Norris, and we've got a clip of Lando after post qualifying. Casey, if you got that clip for Lando Norris, I want to take a listen to this and kind of follow up on a discussion we had in post qualifying. So let's hear from Lando Norris.
I am, yes, especially here in Zandvoort. It's always a nice thing to do. So it was a good lap, probably one of my better laps, and I put everything together. Apart from turn 1, I think couldn't have been happier with the lap. So good. Probably didn't expect the gap to be so big, but also when I did the lap, I was very happy with it, and kind of expected nothing less than to probably have a bit of a gap to second place, So I felt good out there. The car was feeling mega, and I was very confident out there. So always a good thing.
From your own perspective, are you feeling good? Have those changes you've maybe made, even if the little things, have kind of made you come into this weekend feeling good, and you can go and win the race tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm just cracking on. Trying to not think that we've had a big break, and I'm not feeling any pressure. I'm not feeling any of these things. I'm just trying to do what I know I'm capable of doing and work well with the team. The team are doing an amazing job. We've got some good upgrades here. Everything's flowing well. Everyone's very motivated, and that's what you want from a team. So, I owe them a lot, and owing them with a pole position, first race back is always a good thing.
Good luck tomorrow.
Cheers, man.
That's the way you do it, kid. Go out there, take the pole by a monster chunk, and then tell everybody, well, I could have gone a little faster if I'd gotten turn one straight. So that'll give them something to think about.
That's true, Bob. And I thought it was interesting because we were talking yesterday how sometimes Lando has an attitude of, he doesn't sound like a champion, right? He kind of gets down on himself. And if you think about it, this is kind of I was thinking about this morning, it's kind of something that you see Charles Leclerc do and George Russell. It's almost like this is the new style of this next generation coming up. And I was thinking, is this sort of an inner confidence, right? That they have the confidence that they can go ahead and criticize themselves. You think of the old bravado from the old school, like maybe Alonso, where, you never show just even a hint of weakness, but maybe this is just their way of doing it. But, it's a different take on it.
Yeah, right. They're all new age men, they're humble, they're self-deprecating. Yeah, well, I lucked into that pole by a third of a second while everybody behind. I was looking at the gaps. Max Verstappen is ahead of is covered with the two cars behind him, going back to Russell, by like a tenth of a second, 0.11 or something like that. And yet he's looking at Lando Norris, who bettered him by 0.356 or whatever it was. I mean, that's a huge gap. Of course, that was qualifying. Now you got to go out and do it when the points are awarded. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's somebody maybe gave Lando Norris a great big bowl full of confidence during the break or something. Get a little swagger there, Lando.
Funny you should say about the fact that the points are paid today, because I felt a bit for Lando yesterday, because that qualifying lap was something pretty special in those conditions, as you say, with the margin he had. But all of the questions he got were about his race starts. Now, if we're fair to Norris, his race starts on average are pretty good. I think they're above average in terms of average out the whole grid, reaction time, speed up to 150 kph, that sort of thing. But the 5 times he started first on a grid in Formula One, he's never led at the end of the first lap. And 2 of the occasions this year, he started on pole position, and he's been third at the end of the first lap in Spain and again in Hungary. And that's what people kept asking him about. Instead of saying, great lap you just put together, they were like, yeah, but can you hold on to it tomorrow? And if he's trying to be confident and have that positive mindset, all he's getting is reminders of, yeah, but you've not done this yet.
Right.
You've not done this yet.
Of all your failures, right?
Exactly. I know it's our job, in a sense, to kind of point out what could happen or, what he has to work on. But at the same time, I felt for him. So I think this is actually going to be, psychologically, this is a big, big start today for him.
No question.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see who's on what tire at the start too, because there seems to be a whole page full of possible race strategies. And of course, since the times are all so close, the field is so tight. Who's going to start on the softs? Who's going to start on the hards? We may even see a few of the medium tire thrown in there, and that's been sort of the unloved tire of the weekend. So, yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting start for sure.
Hey, going back to Lando a little bit, I was thinking, as we're getting ready this morning, I was thinking, what races has Lando won? And then I realized he's only won Miami. And it was just a little bit surprising. I thought, well, yeah, that's true. But, with the success of the upgrades that McLaren's had and the speed, we've been saying now for several races, McLaren's got the fastest car, but he's only won that one race. I don't know, does that catch on at all like it did me?
No.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Go, you go, Bob. You go first.
Well, I was just going to say he could have won Hungary, but we all know that story. Yeah, I suppose it is an anomaly, but it kind of follows on from Chris's point that for his 4 career poles now, he has yet to lead at the end of the first lap. So obviously there's something lacking there in his racecraft, and I suppose it's probably equal measures of help and hurt if people keep reminding him of it. Get that start down.
Yeah, it's why I think it's crucial today. It's obviously a shorter run, much shorter run to turn 1 than it was in either Hungary or Barcelona, where he got slipstreamed and had to get defensive against not only the other car on the front row, but cars coming from behind as well. The one I really want to defend him on, actually, is Sochi. So in Sochi, 2021, his first pole position, he got a monster start. He got a brilliant launch from pole position. But the run down to turn 2, which is the first braking zone, was so long that he still gave everyone a tow, and Carlos Sainz came flying past him in the braking zone. There was nothing he could do about that. That was just a circumstance of the track layout. I was genuinely watching it back. I was like, that was a great start for someone on pole for the first time, but there's just nothing he could do. But yeah, what I find interesting is that we've been talking about him as a championship contender, and not only a championship contender, but one to Max Verstappen, who has just been imperious for so long. And what Norris needs to do to make this a championship is win multiple races in a row. If not all of them between now and the end of the season, if Max is going to be second to him every time. And that's the thing. Max seems to, he's put the car on the front row this weekend, and it shouldn't really be. That car didn't look quick enough to be there. I think he needs to kind of almost be perfect at all times. And I guess I think we've seen it, haven't we? I think people have seen enough from Norris that says he can do that. I don't know about the consistency yet, but that he can win multiple races, that he is extremely quick. Look at yesterday. That performance is in there alongside that car that McLaren has now given him. But he and the team need to execute. And I think maybe we've forgotten just kind of how much of a learning process it still is for him and the team, that we're talking about them as title contenders. And just the one win. Still a lot of learning to do.
Yeah, and the team, too. We've seen that, too, with strategy. I want to show something. If you're on the YouTube broadcast, you can see this, but there's a visualization of Norris's gap yesterday in qualifying, that 3.56 seconds. It looks to be about at least 4 car lengths, so let's not forget that. But right behind him is Piastri, about a car length, but really not even a car length is behind him is Russell. And to your point, Chris, not only does Lando need to win a bunch of races in a row to beat Verstappen in the championship, he needs to put a gap between himself and Verstappen. And Russell in the Mercedes, we talked about it on Wheel to Wheel, Chris, on Wednesday, where if they could put a couple of cars between Norris and Verstappen, like Piastri, number 1, or some Mercedes, and Russell's in a good position to do that today. He's got obviously a quick car, and starting in 4th position behind Piastri, out behind Verstappen, it's a possibility. But I just think that that's something we need to think about, is that how does that happen, Chris? You say he needs to beat him, but he needs to put that gap. And I think, right now it's Piastri and the Mercedes cars, although not today for Lewis Hamilton with the position he's going to start in, we'll talk about later. But I just think that's a point that we have to, to make, because right now Verstappen is clearly in the lead for the championship by 70 something points, and that's not an easy thing to make up, like you were saying.
78 points is massive to try and turn around. And I mean, I'm now stood right at the front of Max Verstappen's grid box on the grid, and if I look down to turn 1, I'm on the inside line, so I've got Lando Norris just off to my left, and actually the way the track is, the way the cambers, Norris is kind of more on the flat, slightly cambered to the left, to the outside of the track. Max's grid start is very much cambered to the right, sloping towards the pit lane. So it's not flat here, which is quite interesting. But I don't think I've spoken to anyone this weekend, or certainly in the last 24 hours, that thinks about the potential of Max Verstappen going backwards at the start of this race. Everyone's thinking about Max Verstappen potentially leading into turn 1 because he makes good starts, he's on the inside line, he's aggressive, and Norris has this kind of maybe mental situation that he's going to have to overcome by getting through the first lap in the lead. But no one's going, oh, yeah, but what if Max gets done by Piastri or by Russell? I think it's unlikely, without a proper poor start, You need a big difference here because of the short runs turn one, where I can actually see the marker boards from here as well, down, the braking points down towards the first corner. So I'm probably at about 350 meters from the first corner. So they're going to accelerate and then brake in that time. It's not a long run here. And yeah, I don't think anyone really envisages Max losing out. And that really is a feather in his cap, isn't it? It's the way that he executes the big moments that make a big difference to his race outcome, and just handles them so well on the whole, is one of the reasons why his lead actually just seems to keep getting bigger rather than coming down. Because, as Bob rightly said, there were other opportunities for Norris to win races, plenty of other opportunities for Norris to take points out of Verstappen, Spa being one, Austria being another one, where it hasn't happened. And I think really it's got to happen today, just to kind of give, I think, even Norris a bit of belief that he could continue to do that over the 9 races that remain afterwards.
Yep. All right.
And at the other end of the spectrum, Max Verstappen will be sitting there knowing that he has to get ahead of Norris at the start. Because it's so difficult to pass here, he needs every arrow in his quiver. He's got to get ahead.
Yep. All right. Well, coming up after this quick break, we're going to talk about all the rest of the teams down the grid and maybe your favorite driver. After this, back after these messages. All right. We're still live on YouTube. We got the usual folks out there. Got a nice little crowd watching. Kevin Kelly, TW, Mike Bowles. Best time of the day in Europe. The house is sleeping. Got my fresh ground coffee, the recliners, man's best friend, the dog, and the SCB pre-show. The life is good. Well, thanks, Mike. We appreciate it. Kevin Kelly. Who else?
I'm jealous of that. That sounds like a great setup.
Yeah. That sounds like a way to start the day. That is the advantage here in the States, Chris. You do get the TV and the house to yourself usually in the mornings because everybody's still asleep. Yeah. Kevin.
Or get everyone up, but just chilling with some coffee and the family and the dog would be lovely, wouldn't it? But I can't believe I just said that. Like I'm jealous of that. I'm stood here on the grid in Zandfoort. I should pinch myself sometimes, but it does sound great, Mike.
Yeah, everybody.
You darn betcha you ought to pinch yourself.
Everyone's willing to trade with you, Chris. Let's see what else. Anybody else chatting away here? Kevin Kelly is 287 hours until his retirement. Not days, hours. That's pretty good, KK.
Then what are you going to do?
Yeah. Oh, let's see what else. Bob, let me look at your stories that you got in here. We talked about that GM thing. There's no reason we can't grab a couple of these that we talked about yesterday.
Yeah. Might want to talk about the F1 Academy weekend.
Yeah, I was
kind of compacted by everything.
Yeah, and I was on the site a minute ago, and right before we went on air, and I was struggling to find the full results, and I don't see them. But yeah, they did get delayed.
I'll give you some from the top of my head.
Yeah,
we had 2 races this morning, so I'll give you some from the top of my head.
All right.
Hi, this is Karan Chandok, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, everybody, grab that cup of coffee, settle in, and we're going to get you ready for the Dutch Grand Prix coming up in about 40 minutes. Jon Massengale, Bob Varsha, Chris Medland in Zandfoort. And Chris, when we went off the air yesterday, you literally, like moments later, said it looked like it was about to pour down, and apparently it did. It had to delay the F1 Academy racing.
It did. It actually postponed that race to this morning. As I was walking back from the paddock here is split into 2 parts because Zandvoort is such a compact circuit. You may be aware of that based on the fact we've got these banked corners to fit things in. But so the engineering trucks and the way where teams do all their work that relate to actually driving the car, they are behind the pit lane, as you would expect. But then the hospitality units that you quite often see on television, it's about a 5-minute walk down towards the final corner. And that's where I was on air with us after qualifying yesterday. So I was walking up from that paddock to the media centre that's above the pit lane. And genuinely, you felt the temperature drop by about 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Like genuinely, you
Oof.
could really
Wow.
feel it went from warm to cold. The wind had picked up massively again, and it had already been windy, but again, you noticed that. And I kind of turned around and saw the dark clouds and was like, this is not going to be nice. And it just started to drop those pretty big, fat drops of rain as I got inside. And the formation had just begun for the F1 Academy race. They're on slick tyres, and you have a biblical storm coming in. So they were sensible, race control. They delayed the start. They let everyone change to wet tyres, and they waited and waited and waited to see how the weather would play out. And after about a 40-minute delay of them just sat on the grid in the rain, which I must say, still had a huge crowd waiting. And the mechanics that were getting soaked were dancing with the crowd to the music and stuff. It was quite a sight. But in the end, they decided it wasn't going to happen last night. It was too dangerous. And postponed it to this morning. So we ended up with back-to-back F1 Academy races this morning. One won by Abby Pulling, the shortened race, the first one. And the second one was won by Dorian Pat, the Mercedes F1 Academy driver, with Pulling dropping a third in that one behind Maya Voigt, who is the Ferrari one, who is Dutch. So the home fans were very happy with that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I did find the full standings on both, full results on both race 1 and race 2, and I was just looking for the Americans in there, and I know that Chloe Chambers finished 12th in, this is race 2, and let me check race 1 because I wanted to see how she did.
Top 10 in race 1, I think.
Yeah, I think so
I think
too.
she got top 10 in race 1. I'm going to say about 7th off the top of my head.
Yeah, let's see. Race 1.
Yeah, you got to feel for these drivers. They haven't raced since late June.
Yeah.
And then you come to a track like Zandvoort all these weeks later.
Yep, she finished 6th. You're right. She finished.
And then you're told you have to get up at top. Good result for her in that sense. But also, they had to get up so early today to do that first race. So early.
Yeah.
And it can't be easy to be disrupted like that. And just getting your body into shape to do back-to-back races early in the morning. So, a real challenge to them, actually. But there was some good racing. It's just hard to actually saw it kind of settle down, certainly at the front in each race quite early on, because it's just so difficult to follow closely and overtake. And it was a reminder, I think, to a lot of people, the work F1 has done in terms of the DRS system, but also these regulations we have, that on a track like this, in a Formula 4 car, you can't really follow and overtake. And now you want a car that's going, nearly 30 seconds a lap quicker, and you can somehow find a way past. Yeah, it's quite an achievement. So, it was a reminder of actually how tricky it could be. And to allude to your point earlier, Bob, just before we went to the break, about how Max Verstappen knows he needs to take the lead at the start if he's going to win the race. Mm-hmm. It is because, speaking to Topper Culloch, the Aston Martin engineer, who is quite good at giving us briefings before each race, he was saying it's going to be a track position race. It's all about getting your strategy right, but you're unlikely to see much overtaking unless you're on very, very different strategies. So expect early pit stops and the start to be a really crucial point.
Mm. Well, I definitely want to talk.
It's always been the plight of the junior series. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Bob. Finish up.
Well, I was just going to make that point about the junior series drivers. They really have a tough haul of it. You know, the Formula One is the stars, and I'm sure it's true in other series as well, IndyCar, whatever you like. The junior series drivers always kind of get kicked to the curb, as it were, in terms of schedules. Yeah, television is involved and all that kind of stuff, but you know, you have very little time on track. And then things like this happen where you run your first race on the Sunday morning, knowing the second race is going to start 70 minutes later. So you got to, maybe change your strategy to preserve your race car. You got to have something to drive with in the second race. I recall talking with Chip Ganassi once about how he picked his drivers, and he really gave a hard look at Formula 3000, as it was called back in the day, because those drivers had to get up to speed quickly. They had to avoid crashes or bending the race car in any way. And that's what he wanted in an IndyCar driver. He wanted that kind of, right on the pace, right away, maximum use of the available time and equipment. So, I think about that whenever I see the junior series, whatever it is, F1 Academy, F2, F3, whatever. Those folks really have a difficult time, maximizing their weekend when they're on the same bill as Formula One.
Mm. Well, it's true, Bob. And I want to shift gears because I want to talk about the very back of the grid right now, because We touched on Alexander Albon with the penalty that they got for the floor that Chris was talking about that was just slightly oversized. And I also want to talk about Logan Sargent because he did not get to qualify yesterday after that huge crash in free practice 3 that honestly it was pretty scary because the car caught fire. He was sitting in the car and he was just, doing it. He was actually looked like he wasn't even getting out of the car. He was still, just kind of recovering from the crash. And the radio, his team radio was saying, "Get out of the car. It is on fire now." And by the time he was able to unstrap and jump from that car, I've seen some amazing photographs, the car was engulfed. And Chris, have you heard anything from Williams about Logan Sargent's car? Obviously they said they tried to get it ready for qualifying. He couldn't run, but what about today?
For today, it's going to be okay. They're going to be here on the grid. He's actually going to start, funnily enough, ahead of Alex Albon now because Albon's disqualification means he is put on the very back row. It's kind of the order that the FIA permitted them to start, and they'd given the decision to Sargent to be allowed to start based on his practice times before they'd had the issue with Albon. So I'm actually back at the 2 Williams grid slots now, which are chaotic, actually. I feel for them because people are running around everywhere, all over their grid slots, because this is where all the mechanics come to the back to collect their cars. So when the drivers do their recce laps and they go around, they come through the pit lane, they're pushing on those laps. They're getting a feel for the grip level, the conditions, how the car feels on high fuel, and then they have to stop short of the grid and get pushed. They're not allowed to drive under their own power. They'll be pushed by the mechanics all the way to their grid slot. Well, because Williams make up the back row, they haven't put any barriers up. They've just got their tyre blankets marking out each box, and their wheel guns are on those. But they're basically, I think people haven't quite seen them. And you've got TV crews tripping over things. You've got we just had the 2 McLaren cars, actually. They've been very early to the grid, getting pushed in between the 2 Williams slots. And basically, I think they hadn't seen the first one. They had to do a bit of a zigzag. It's almost like going down a street you should have gone down, and you're trying to navigate a very narrow gap. But I feel for them a bit here because they can't really get on with their own work until all the other cars have got out their way. But it won't take too long until that. There's over half an hour that the drivers and teams get to prepare on the grid. And as I say that, though, someone has just gone into the pit lane, which I imagine will be Kevin Magnussen, since he's starting from the pits. Everyone else queuing up at the back. So yes, to eventually answer your question, Logan Sargent will be on the grid here today. I'm just trying to see if I actually spot his physical car coming into position. But I do think we might need to talk a little bit about his actual seat, because the intel I got after yesterday was very much that questions started being asked of other teams up and down the grid about who they might have within their driver stables, reserve drivers they have available. We're talking people like Liam Lawson, Jack Doohan, Mick Schumacher, perhaps, just sounding out. Who do you have? What's their contractual status? What is your willingness to allow us to perhaps put them in the car if we wanted to? Now, it wasn't a direct request to have a driver right here, right now, but it definitely was questions about what are our options if we're gonna make a replacement mid-season. And I think yesterday's crash with a heavily updated car was expensive in many ways for Logan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Apparently James Vowles was on suicide watch after the events of yesterday, and he addressed the elephant in the room. He said, "No, I'm not going to make an emotional decision, but we put all this time and effort and resources into updating a car, and then the first thing that happens is the driver puts it in the wall." He was not a happy camper, and I think if anything, it only put paid to Logan Sargent's career, maybe a few races early.
Yeah, I think
we've got to remember with Logan is that obviously he's an inexperienced driver still, and the team are willing. They knew he'd make mistakes last year, but this year, even if the gap to Alex has been bigger than they wanted, this year was meant to be the year where A, they saw progress, but B, they wanted to see him, in a sense, calming down. Fewer of these big mistakes, fewer expensive mistakes. You can still make one or two. We saw Albon make it in Melbourne, didn't we? Big crash there that wiped out a car. It does happen, but then it was only a race later in Japan that Logan did it again. Here, actually, last year he had 2 big crashes in Zandvoort, and to follow it up in a practice session, dipping 2 tyres on the grass. I just think they're like, we can't afford this, financially can't afford this to keep happening. So they're looking
Right.
maybe to see if there's a safer pair of hands available, but not a clear-cut choice when it's mid-season, and especially when you're looking at generally other inexperienced drivers at that point. So all of that adds up to a really tough spot for Logan to be in himself, to try and perform in when he will know, he'll be aware of this speculation and the discussions that are being had.
Yeah, I think no matter what, it's not a good spot for Logan Sargent, and it absolutely reminds me of Mick Schumacher at Haas when he was doing exactly the same thing. He was
Same deal.
costing the team. I mean, you remember Gunther Steiner, filterless Gunther Steiner, was just saying, "This is killing us. It's costing us, so much money, and we just can't continue this way." And they did. And they made that decision and got rid of him.
Which is why it's so ironic that one of the drivers, being thrown into the pot of potential replacements for Logan Sargent is Mick Schumacher, who is a Mercedes driver, and Williams is a Mercedes customer team. So, it makes sense on paper, except as you just said, Schumacher lost his previous gig for the same reason that Logan's about to lose his.
And Chris, don't you think the people that at Williams are thinking that exact same thing when they're looking at Schumacher?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the reasons they're asking questions of multiple teams. Schumacher's actually linked with Alpine now. He's part of their World Endurance Championship setup. Yeah. So they're going and looking at who is available and how they're performing. Schumacher did take part in essentially a shootout, a bit too much of a term, but he did have a comparison test alongside Jack Doohan for Alpine at Paul Ricard before Alpine decided to put Doohan in the car for 2025. He had a chance there. So again, that's probably been a bit of a message to Williams that, well, maybe if he's not quite performing compared to someone like Doohan, that's why they'll go and ask about Doohan's availability. But Doohan is a rookie, so you've got no guarantees. He wouldn't make mistakes that were costly as well. It's always a problem. There's not just, the perfect ready-made replacement just waiting to jump in. Otherwise, they'd already be in the car. And it just is. I don't think there's going to be a change at Monza next week. I think that would be too soon. And I'm not convinced that means they'll be one of either the next two races, because that's Baku and Singapore, and you don't get away with many mistakes at either of those. So that actually might buy Logan a bit of time if there's not a clear and obvious candidate that comes to the fore for the team. But also, we're saying this, it's all very negative, and it is because of the situation we're in right now. But a clean race today, a solid race, this is a quick car. Like, Williams think they can go forward here. They're on the back row, but they've got a car they think that's on race pace close to Ferrari with the upgrades they've put on it. So they should go forward. If Logan has a solid race and moves forward, that might just buy him an extra week. He can have a clean weekend next weekend. That might buy him an extra 2. But yeah, he's on very, very thin ice, I think.
Yeah. Hey, one last thing before we take a quick break. And Bob, Varsha, I want to ask you, what do you think that Logan and Alexander Albon could move up to today? Because both starting at the back there, right ahead of Magnussen in pit lane.
Wow. If there's a track where it's hard to predict opportunities, it's this one. I made a note in my grid rundown that Albon, I think, has an opportunity here. I think Logan's going to be instructed to let Alex by immediately and let him start picking off cars. Getting to the points is probably a bridge too far, but I think we're going to see a lot out of Alex Albon today. And keep in mind, as Chris says, that's a quick car. You know, just keep it on the island, and you can do good things with it if you have the skill set. And so I think Albon might get as high as 11th or 12th, maybe. And as for Logan, boy, I don't know if he could pick up 2 or 3 spots, maybe, but certainly nothing more spectacular than that.
Yep. All right. Well, speaking of the Bob Varsha grid, we have that coming up next, right after this. All right. Back live on YouTube. Let's see what's going on out there. Kevin Kelly says Williams is talking to Red Bull about.
I was staying at the back, so I wanted to try and get. Sorry, I was going to say I was trying to get James Vowles if I could see him, but he's not come back here yet. So, Bob,
okay.
I'm afraid it's most likely that I'm going to start grabbing people just as you start your grid walk.
Of course.
I think our listeners have come to expect it, Chris. So you go right ahead.
What was that? What was that last one? I was looking at maybe. Oh, well, Kevin Kelly says Williams talking to Red Bull about Lawson. TW said he worked rotating shift when he was in the U.S. Air Force. 2 to midnight, 2 days, 2 swings off. My sleep pattern is still screwed up. Yeah, and Mike Bull says, thank you for your service. Yeah, TW.
Boy.
That makes sense now. He's in Thailand. Let's see. Who else? David Lawrence, good morning. He said, sorry I'm late. Yeah, you know what? That's one of the reasons why we put the Varsha grid in the slot that we do. It's just because I figure there's some people still waking up.
Yeah, we were talking about you in your absence. It got pretty ugly. Okay, don't take this the wrong way, but I pay no attention to what you flash up on the screen. You could put Pamela Anderson up there in her birthday suit and I wouldn't notice.
David Lawrence says if they're going to dump Logan, just go ahead and do it. I don't want to see him getting dumped, but it is a business. Yeah, this is F1. Sorry. Here we go.
Yeah, he's got to get to work on next year.
Yeah.
Hi guys, this is Pierre Gasly and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back. Whether you're in the car, driving down the road, in a big 18-wheeler, listening, where you're on the sofa, wherever you are, we appreciate you tuning in. And we have an exciting development for you because we have the Bob Varsha grid. He's going to run it down all the way top to bottom for you. Mr. Varsha, take it away.
Okay, I've got about a 75% chance of getting it straight after all the changes in the back half overnight. But anyway, here's my best shot. On row one, Lando Norris in the McLaren. The race for pole was really pretty tight until Norris's last blast, which turned out to be nearly 0.4 of a second quicker than provisional pole sitter Max Verstappen. And he was just over a tenth quicker than fourth place. It's Norris's fourth career pole, 3 coming this season, and number 159 for the legendary McLaren brand. P2, Verstappen in the Red Bull, the 5th straight Grand Prix that has not produced a pole for the triple world champion, poor guy. But he is riding 3 straight wins from pole here in his home race. And the onboard cameras showed that Max is having to guard for whatever he gets from the car. Row 2, P3, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. The bad news is the Aussies' final shot at pole came apart slightly in the second half of the lap around this short, tight circuit. The good news is the Papaya cars have been quick in all conditions.
Sorry, Bob, it's that time for me to interrupt you again, but you mentioned Oscar Piastri. I've got his team boss, Zach Brown, here, stood by Lando Norris's car. And Zach, what a performance from Lando yesterday.
That was a mega lap, as I think Brundle called it, Senna-esque. So, yeah, we were on pit wall when he put up that lap time. Was a bit, wow, where'd that come from? Because I thought all 5 cars would be within a 10. So we got great pace. Both drivers, I think, can win. Unfortunately, they're surrounded by a few other drivers that I think can win. So I think it's going to be a special race today.
Lando's been asked a lot about his starts ahead of this race. Have you had to say anything to him? Do you see anything that he needs to really prove something today off the line?
I just told him not to let anyone pass, and everything will be fine. So, yeah, no, he'll be fine. It's I'm excited, ready for the racing.
Yeah, well, it's not an easy task keeping Max Verstappen behind, especially at his home race. You think it's going to be crucial into turn 1?
Yeah, you know, these starts are always a bit more exciting than you like them to be when you got 2 cars at the front. So, but they're all pros, so I'm sure it'll be fun.
And just funny, both cars in the top 3, upgraded car here this weekend as well. How pleased are you to see that momentum continuing? We've seen other teams have to change specs, go back, wait with upgrades. You guys keep moving forward.
Yeah, all the men and women at McLaren have just continued to do an outstanding job. Everything we bolt on the car seems to work, so we'll just keep trying to bolt stuff on the car.
And are you a fan of techno music?
Oh, of course.
You better be here. Good luck.
All you do is bolt stuff on the car. That's the secret of being a team CEO. Okay, now we finished with Oscar Piastri looking for his second win in 3 races. P4 starting next to him is George Russell in the Mercedes, coming off a heartbreaking DQ last time out at Spa. With his teammate Lewis Hamilton buried on the grid, it'll be up to Georgie Boy to uphold Mercedes' recent run of success and avenge that disqualification. Row 3, P5, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull was judged to have been impeded by Lewis Hamilton early in Q2. Hamilton took a penalty, but it still cost Perez, who's under huge pressure to perform. It cost him a set of precious soft compound tires, so he could only make one push lap in Q3. P6, Charles Leclerc in the first of the Ferraris. The Monaco winner says he's getting tired of repeating himself when he's asked where the car's performance has gone since that big day 6 races ago. His answer is always, we know we have work to do. Row 4, P7, Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin got on the radio, said, that's all I can do. The double world champ won the first of his 32 Grand Prix victories on this weekend 21 years ago in Hungary. P8, Lance Stroll in the other Aston Martin. A penalty to the Williams of Alex Albon moved Stroll into an all-Aston Row 4. In fairness, the Canadian appeared to me to be destined for the position on merit anyway, when a couple of snaps from the car held him back. Row 5, P9, Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, clearly delighted to be in the top 10 on yet another weekend when the French team's plans proved off the mark. Points for the Frenchman would be a fitting welcome to his new team principal. P10, Carlos Sainz in the second Ferrari, plagued by the conditions and gearbox issues all weekend. Sainz needed a Hail Mary just to advance from both Q1 and Q2. In fact, his first laps on the soft tire came in the opening session of qualifying. Row 6, P11, Yuki Tsunoda in the RB, whose starting position is maybe misrepresentative. Stuck in the midfield for most of the weekend, the Japanese driver timed in 13th, then benefited from penalties to others ahead of him to start on the brink of the points. P12, Nico Hülkenberg in the first of the Haas cars, just 7 points behind RB for 6th among constructors is the American team. The Hulk complained of a lack of consistent practice. He'll be watching Tsunoda off the line, you can be sure, when the lights go out. Then things get dicey. Daniel Ricciardo will start. For the national anthem. Hey, I'm talking here. Row 8, Row 7, Daniel Ricciardo in the RB was back in 15th place. But anyway, Danny Rick admits he knows his future in F1 depends on results. He moved up the grid due to penalties and equipment changes to others. And I found it interesting. Danny Rick said, if it all works out, he's a Formula One driver next year, great. If not, and I quote, c'est la vie. Bonne journée, Danielle. Starting 15th, let's see, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, who pronounced his Dutch weekend done after qualifying 12th. He was then dropped to 15th for impeding Sergio Perez, then promoted due to Alex Albon's DQ for a tech violation. He's been bouncing up and down the back half or the front half of the grid. Then you have Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. Given the season the French team has had, who'd have thought there'd be a lot of hand-wringing over the cars starting 9th and 16th? Ocon may well be thinking about his new contract with Haas for 2025. Back at 16th, Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, the most accomplished driver without a seat for next season. And things are starting to look a little grim with just a couple of vacancies still out there. But face it, the guy is a proven winner. 17th, Zhou Guanyu, his Sauber teammate. Things are even darker for the only Chinese driver in the series. But despite a lack of results, Zhou has perhaps the most important asset for a Grand Prix driver, sponsorship. Row 10. No, excuse me. Starting 18th, Logan Sargent in the Williams. Depressingly true to recent form, the only American on the grid crashed heavily in Saturday morning practice, missed qualifying entirely while repairs were made, and he'll try to piece something together on this tricky circuit. Good luck to him. P19, originally 20, was Alex Albon, who timed in a solid 8th in the upgraded Williams, but ran afoul of the scrutineers on the floor of his car. But he should be fun to watch early in the race, as I said. And starting from the pit lane, Kevin Magnussen and the other Haas, who replaced the battery and the control software overnight. And so he must start from the pit lane, which, given the fact this is Zandvoort, might be the safest place to be.
All right. Yeah, I want to find out some more about that Kevin Magnussen battery replacement. I'm just curious about it. I wonder why they had to do it. Was it just, normal wear and tear? Was it damaged? That you hear a lot about that on the street electric cars, like one cell going bad and you have to replace the whole thing or repair it or whatever. But all right. Well, Chris Medland, we're about to go to break. Are we still doing the national anthem out there?
It's just ended, actually, and it meant that I headed straight for Haas to see if I can get an answer to your question, but I don't see Ao Komatsu right now, so you could probably sneak in a quick break, and I'll see who I can get before they kick me off the grid.
All right, you're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM. Back after these messages.
I hope I got that grid right. I didn't have time to cut and paste on the computer, so I have all kinds of circles and arrows on my printed copy.
You did good, actually.
Left somebody out.
Yeah, nobody noticed. Nobody's got their notepad out and trying to keep track of it. So,
right.
David Lawrence, was that your cousin or somebody? It was Duncan Lawrence singing the national anthem. So I noticed. I saw it. I just did a quick double take. I was like, David Lawrence, what?
The national anthem is sacrosanct in television. When you're covering a sporting event of any kind, you do not want to be speaking when the anthem plays. Sometimes we absolutely avoid it by going to commercial or something, just so we don't, step on it, because you will hear from it endlessly from patriots. But I wondered if anybody noticed during the coverage of the Democratic National Convention, which channel? I think I was watching MSNBC, and they just plowed right through the anthem, chatting away.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that probably wouldn't happen on Fox.
No, sir.
Todd Dauber is up early. He must be on the West Coast because he says 5:45 a.m. I guess the discussion talking about sitting at a bar is a little early because David Lawrence is at an airport bar, apparently. Yeah, thanks, Todd, for tuning in so early. And let's see what else here. TW said it's 7:45 p.m. Still happy hour. There you go. Hey, Chris.
On the break.
What do we got, Casey? Here we go. 15 seconds. You got somebody?
Hopefully James Vowles. I can see him, so I'll try and grab him.
All right. We're about to come back. We're just going to comment on Lawrence. Here we go.
Hi, this is Gene Haas, and this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back to Speed City. We've got Chris Medland out at Zandfoort. Chris, how's it going out there?
It's going very well, and James Vowles very kindly walked over to me as well, so I didn't even need to do the awkward will we, won't we talk. James, we're on the back row, and I feel like your cars shouldn't be here. It's quicker than this weekend, isn't it?
It's much quicker than this, but the responsibility for our cars being here rests firmly on our shoulders and only on our shoulders. The floor on Alex's car, as you saw, was slightly over, and we're talking decimals or a millimeter, but that is the regulations. They're black and white on this one. We have differences between how we measured it and how the FIA measured it, which is why it was a debate, but we have to take it on the chin. It's not worth any performance. That's the irritation out of it. It's just accounting, but we've got to get these things right. You cannot be on a world stage, be in the top 10, and not have all the details correct on an update. And in the case of Logan, that damage was extraordinary in FP3, but when you have that level of damage in FP3, you're going to put yourself at the back of the grid. We have accountability and responsibility. What I'm excited by is the car's quick. So we've got lots of potential today going forward.
Can I just ask, with the floor, do you just have to shave off a tiny bit of it to make it legal again?
But when you're talking literally decimals or millimeter, you have a look. You tell me if you can see it. You won't. But yeah, it's just sandpaper fundamentally.
Just like everyone in their garage. But what can you do then today, moving forward with these two cars?
I think with Alex's pace was Friday, we were competing with Ferrari. So just taking example, generally we're going to look for a little something, a different offset to get us there. Super good.
All right, well, good luck. I know I'm in the queue here, so thank you very much for your time. I had to get out of the way there, but I tell you, we'll pick up on, depending on how Logan goes today, with his future after the race.
Yeah.
But, I
Chris?
must admit, chaps, you all heard that clearer than I can because it is windy as anything. The music's blaring. I can only see his lips moving.
Hey, Chris, I'm ashamed I don't know the answer to this question, but how did Williams get caught out? I mean, Joe Bauer, the technical representative for the FIA, couldn't possibly have eyeballed the Williams and said, "Oh, that doesn't look right, so let's measure it." How does
the car get scanned? They use an actual scanner, 3D scanner. So the FIA will scan the whole dimensions of the car, and essentially, software will flag up that's what the dimensions are based on the FIA equipment. So it will have created a 3D model of their car just to tell them if it is within the right boundaries that needs to be in every place, and the width of the floor was not. So it's the way that they work. The teams do it themselves. They have their own scanners, and they're not allowed to scan each other's cars. That's when it's outlawed. Teams can't scan each other's cars, but they can use these scanners at their own factories on their own cars to try and make sure they comply with regulations.
That's amazing that the FIA scanner can detect decimals of a millimeter. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, think about how much area they're scanning. They're scanning the floor of the car. That's amazing.
I think
this one.
Decimals of a millimeter sounds redundant.
I get what he's trying to say.
Wild. Was it wild that he said sandpaper?
Yes, that was the amazing thing, that they fixed it with sandpaper. A little, just walked over with a little 4-inch square of sandpaper and fixed it.
Give it a kick.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, I was watching while I think we were in the break. I was watching Martin Brundle. He interviewed Jack Doohan, and Jack looked prepared for his interview with Martin Brundle. Instead of yesterday.
Prepared?
Sorry, I totally missed that. Around some drum and bass that is blasting out right next to me. Say that again.
Well, I was just talking about how when Jack Doohan came up and pinched you yesterday, didn't know you were live on the air, and when you told him you were live across North America, he immediately went into corporate mode. But he was being interviewed by Martin Brundle today, and he looked well prepared. Looked like he was standing up straight and towing the company line.
Had the cap on.
Yeah, he will. He'll have been ready for it. I'm going to ask Toto Wolff one question, because whenever I ask you this, you seem to win. Toto, can you win today from fourth on the grid?
It's a long shot, but why not?
Right. That's our good luck charm. Let's see if you do it. It's going to be a great race if you do. Good luck. He's just George Russell getting strapped in, and I've got to get off the grid, but I wanted to just get that in.
That's great.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? I saw Christian Horner getting interviewed, and Martin Brundle had him, and he actually looked really upbeat. They were kind of laughing, and it looked like he was upbeat. Max Verstappen obviously always has a chance to win. And I think we'll go back to what we said at the beginning of the show. Chris, you said it, and that is, Max Verstappen absolutely has a shot to win this because he is such a good starter, right? He can make up, I know that Lando clearly had the faster car yesterday, but man, he can rocket off the start and end up in front of this and potentially hold it off. So you never know who's going to win this. So we shall see. We got about 7. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
That's a good point you make, actually, about the gap yesterday as well, though. From what Zach Brown said to us, it's the fact that was unexpected for McLaren to have that margin, and everyone else was so close, as Bob was saying about the gaps, that even if that had been what we'd seen all weekend long, over one lap, normally you see that gap reduced by 50% in race trim. They're not pushing the cars quite as hard. They're having to manage tyres. They've got higher fuel loads. So if you took that and you halved it to 1.75 or 0.175 seconds per lap, then that's a much, much smaller margin that you're definitely not overtaking with that around a track like here. You need close to a second in terms of a delta. So it does show how crucial the start will be and how closely matched they all could be. But similarly, and again, kind of throwing it back to the start of the show where I was saying this, but if for some reason Verstappen doesn't go forward, if he does lose a place or two at the start for some reason, maybe it's because he's fighting with Lando and the door opens to somebody, he's going to struggle to come through from there as well. It really does all rest on this start for all of them to really open up their races.
Yeah, super important.
Which side of the grid is pole? Chris?
It's on the left-hand side as you look down to turn 1, so the outside of the track, so the racing line. But it does mean that Verstappen's on the inside, so he's got the inside line to turn 1. So a half-decent launch. If he can get his nose alongside Lando, so he can't shut the door completely, that Red Bull's going down the inside.
Yep.
Hey, Chris, any update on the Haas F1 situation? Yesterday when we left, it looked like they had paid that amount due to Uralkali and everything was good. Is that where we stand?
Almost. So yes, until the everything is good part, because as I understand it, everything's been paid. Haas are happy with everything they've done, but they're still awaiting receipt of payment confirmation from Uralkali. And until they get that, they don't know if they will be allowed to leave or not. So they will, if they don't receive that by the time that they're all packed up and ready to start heading towards Monza, they will then have to contact the relevant authorities to say, hey, are we clear to go? Are we good? So there's that slight little bit of trepidation, I think, still. Not that anything is outstanding from Haas's side, but just waiting for the admin to turn around and say, yep, go for it. Yeah. Which, as we said, it's tough to move money. I believe it went through the UAE to get to Russia. You have to work out where's the avenue to do that. So it wasn't a simple, here's our debit card, sort it out in 10 seconds. And I think they're just waiting for the official receipts.
Yeah, I can see that. The banking system is not quite as real time on the weekends as you might expect. So we don't know exactly how all took place. Well, I think cover that.
When it comes to $10 million owed, I think you could probably find a banker who'd be willing to talk to you.
Absolutely. And if you think, it depends where it's gone as well, which way it's traveled through. But as if as I understand it was the UAE, then technically we're talking a country there that Friday, Saturday is their weekend. So now we're into Sunday. This is a working day. So I think they're hopeful that they will just get, that they won't need to chase anything. They'll just be told, yep, off you go. A nuisance for the team really here on the ground. It wasn't, their issue to resolve really, but they've managed to get it sorted.
It's a diplomatic thing as much as it is a financial thing.
Yeah, true. Casey said that Gene's Amex didn't go through. Is that what he was saying? His black card?
Yeah, right. I think Gene has $10 million in the glove box of his car. Then again, we've all worked for international television and radio production companies and, fought tooth and nail to get paid. So this is not unusual.
Yeah.
Well,
very
it is unusual.
True. Very true. I just want to bring up one quick thing before, John, you want to wrap anything. But I didn't get Mario Isola, who I was targeting, and I lost him on the grid. But we were talking a little bit about potential strategies, I think during one of the breaks. I'd be surprised to see anyone in the top 10 on anything other than the soft tyre. Now, that's not to say I'm going to be right. I like to normally ask Mario this before I make such a statement. But from that tyre to turn 1 is still nearly a car length compared to the medium on that run. And given how important track position will be, I don't think anyone could afford to not have that tyre. If you lose a spot at the start, it could be really, really costly to your race. So I think soft, hard might be the most likely strategy for most people. Short first stint, make the earliest pit stop you can onto the hard tyre and run to the end of the race. Forecast is for no rain. It's windy. There's a few dark clouds overhead right now, but we're not expecting it to drop anything on us. So I think it'll be a dry race throughout.
Yeah, but we are by the sea, so you never know. It could be a stray little shower. All right, guys, we got to do our predictions. Mr. Varsha, why don't we start with you and see what you got to predict for the Dutch Grand Prix?
I'm going to take the top 3 in order: Norris, Verstappen, and Piastri.
Chris Medland?
I'm going to go Verstappen, Norris, Russell.
Okay. I am going to go Piastri, Verstappen, Norris, just to shake it up a little bit. And we are almost out of time. One last thing. Hey, Chris, you're talking about tires. What about Terdeg here at Zandvoort?
Not a major issue. Tire life certainly isn't one, and Deg isn't huge. On the soft, you will see some fairly early, but not silly early. So Aston Martin was saying all 3 compounds are very much raceable compounds this weekend.
All right. Well, we are done. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Stay right here on Channel 81 ESPN Extra for the race, and then come back after the race. We'll have a fantastic full 1-hour post-race show. Thank you. We'll talk to you after the race.